Very.
How he's meticulous about that.
Good morning. Welcome to United States Sports Academy on our weekly sports talk program. With me today is Dr. Brett Simmermacher, our chair of sports coaching, and I'm Steve Butler, your host. Sunday was a sad day. Woke up Sunday morning to the news that Jose Fernandez had been killed in a boating accident, the tremendous young pitcher for the Miami Marlins at the age of 24. And then I was watching something on Sunday Night Football, and I just saw it come across the bottom of the screen that Arnold Palmer had passed away, and made it a doubly sad day. I think you could tell how important Arnold Palmer was to the world of sports, because Sunday being an NFL Sunday, the first 15 minutes of the 11 o'clock Sports Center was all about Arnold Palmer. They didn't even give one football score for the first 15 minutes of the show. And as one person put it, I think it was Scott Van Pelt, who actually started at the Golf Channel. And a lot of people don't know this, but the Golf Channel was started by Arnold Palmer, and so he was Scott's boss for a while. And Scott, what Scott said was, you can win 18 majors and be considered the greatest player of all time. You can win that's Jack Nicklaus. You can win 14 majors and be considered by many the greatest player of all times, or you can win 7 majors and be the king. And there always will be only one king, and that was Arnold Palmer. And with his passing, we kind of lost a legend, and it was especially emotional for me, because Arnold Palmer and my dad were the same age, and I lost my dad in 2010, and Arnold kind of reminded me a little bit of my dad, just the way they looked. Obviously my dad wasn't as good a golfer, but Arnold was the one. Arnold was the one who brought golf to the masses. Before Arnold came along, the vast majority of golfers were rich kids from country clubs around the country and in Europe. And then Arnold made it okay for the son of a greenskeeper to play golf. Yeah. And he always went for it. He kind of had a swagger, and he came along at the perfect time. You know, he turned pro in 1954, and so TV had their first sports star in Arnold Palmer. That was kind of the same time that TV got very popular, and it kind of grew with Arnold as it went through TV. Tell me a little bit about Brett. What you thought about when you first heard that Arnold had passed.
Well, I was sitting at watching Sunday night. It was either Sunday night football or Sunday night baseball, one of the two. But I always get alerts on my phone when something happens in the sports world, whether it's Ohio State. You know, you can have it programmed for teams, and anything that happens in the news comes to my phone, and I even said to my wife, "Oh man, Arnold Palmer just passed away," and that, to me, that's one of the moments that you'll never forget. What you were doing, kind of like 9/11. You know, all these things that happen in the world, and people passing, and things that happen throughout the course of a normal day. You know, like Jose Fernandez. I mean, that's sad and everything, but you know, years from now, most people won't remember what they were doing, other than they might say he died the same day as Arnold Palmer died.
Yeah.
You know, so that's how important Arnold Palmer was to not only golf, but just at the world of sport, like you said earlier. You know, I read a story. A guy came back from Vietnam, and they were playing in, what's the one in Dallas?
The Colonial?
Colonial. They were playing at the Colonial, and they had all the Vietnam people that were in wheelchairs after the war. This was in 1967, the article said. And this guy was sitting in a wheelchair. He got injured during Vietnam, and they were all sitting in a row. And there was one golfer that came by and shook their hands, asked them where they were from. That was Arnold Palmer.
Yeah. But, you know, they of course interviewed a lot of current professional golfers Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods and a lot of other players, Davis Love III, on Sports Center Sunday night, and they were all talking about Arnold, and they all said the same thing about how, excuse me, how he would stay there as long as it took to sign every autograph. And if you've ever seen an Arnold Palmer autograph, there's actually one right here. I think it was Davis Love who told the story about when he first came on the tour. Arnold Palmer told him, when you sign your autograph, sign it so people can read it, because if somebody asks you for your autograph, they want to be able to read it. So if you've ever seen an Arnold Palmer autograph, every single one of them is meticulous. You can recognize every letter, and it's just really a nice autograph. And then he added the umbrella later in his career.
Yeah, the story behind that for his clothing line, or just his signature, is the umbrella with white, green, red, and yellow. The 4 colors. They were all sitting around a table with his company. I don't know if it was. I think it was pre-IMG. I want to say that because I think
it was just when he was working with Mike McCormick.
Yeah,
Mark McCormick.
Yeah, I think for some reason that name rings a bell. The article I was reading, but they were sitting around. They were talking about cross golf clubs and several other types of things that he could use as a symbol for his clothing line, or just his signature. And they couldn't come up with anything. Everything they came up with, everybody's like, no, we can't use that. That's already been taken. Those kind of things. And Arnold gets up out of his chair, goes out in the lobby of whatever facility they were in, and he looks down. They must have been up in a couple stories high somewhere. Can't remember what city they were in, but he looks down and sees a woman get out of the car with an umbrella on a rainy day. And he walks back into me and he says, "That's it, an umbrella." And he said everybody was kind of taken aback by that, and they all kind of couple nodded their head like, yeah, that sounds okay. But then, of course, the lawyers had to research it and see if there was a patent on it and all those kind of things. And then several weeks later, they came back and said, no, there was no patent on it. So that's how the umbrella came to fruition.
Nice. Yeah, this is a typical picture of Arnold when it's followed through. I think the reason why Arnie's Army came to be and why everybody loved him so much, because I don't think he could even spell the word "play safe." The two words "play safe." I mean, he always went for it. In fact, a lot of people attribute the real burst of popularity in golf to the 1960 U.S. Open at Cherry Hills in Denver, where Arnold was trailing by 7 strokes after Saturday's round, and he told his caddy that night, he goes, "How far do you think an eagle on number 1 would go?" And number 1 was a par 4, and Arnold had thought all week about trying to drive that green, and he went out there the next day and drove the green. He didn't make the eagle, but he 2-putted for birdie, and then he came back and won the U.S. Open, and everybody went crazy. Arnold ended up with 62 wins on the regular tour and 10 on the senior PGA Tour, and 62 wins places him 5th all time. And if you look at the list, it's Sam Snead 1st, Tiger Woods 2nd, Jack Nicklaus 3rd, Ben Hogan 4th, Arnold Palmer 5th. Now, if they ever do a Mount Rushmore of golf, that's it.
There's your 5.
You don't have to go anywhere else. You've got that one covered. And I once heard Lee Trevino say, I read it in an article on Sports Illustrated. This was in the mid '70s. Lee Trevino, who was one of the best golfers in the '70s, said that every single player who cashes a check from a golf tournament from this point forward should say thanks to Arnold Palmer, because he's the one that and if you look at the numbers are staggering. I looked them up this morning. In Arnold's first year on the tour, the leading money winner was Bob Toski, and he won $65,280. In 1960, in a year in which Arnold Palmer won his first, he won 4 money titles. In 1960 was his first. I think it's important to note, in 1960 he won 2 majors and a total of 8 tournaments, and his total winnings that year was $75,263, and that included wins at the Masters and the U.S. Open. In 1980, which was the first year of the senior PGA Tour, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, the leading money winner won $530,000. in 1996, which is kind of the symbolic passing of the torch from Arnold to Tiger as far as money goes, the leading money winner won $1.7 million. And then in 2006, the year that Arnie officially retired from the PGA Tour, the leading money winner won just under $10 million.
Wow.
So in Arnold's first year, the leading money winner won $65,000. In his last year, they won almost $10 million. And a lot of that is attributed to Arnold. And then kind of in the middle, the Tiger effect took over. But if you talk to any people from that era, they'll tell you that the reason why they were able to make money playing golf was because of Arnold Palmer. I was just curious. I didn't know actually when the Senior PGA Tour started, so I looked it up. And the Senior PGA Tour started in 1980, and Arnold Palmer was born in 1929. So when the Senior PGA Tour was established, Arnold was 51, and the requirement was that you had to be 50 or older. Yeah. Now, some people may think that's a coincidence. I don't seem to think so. I think that the PGA Tour was looking for a way to take that popularity that Arnold Palmer had developed on the PGA Tour and transition, because in reality he wasn't competitive anymore.
Right.
And you know, there's been only a couple players that have done well in tournaments, in regular PGA tournaments after their 50th birthday. We've actually had a couple winners, but Arnold transitioned into the Senior PGA Tour, and I can tell you when in the early days of the Senior PGA Tour, it was kind of like it was with Tiger 5 years ago. If Arnold was playing, the crowds were big. Yeah. If Arnold wasn't playing, the crowds weren't so big. In 1970, I grew up in a little town called Margate near Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and there's another little town called Coral Springs. And they tried to establish a golf tournament, the Coral Springs Open. In 1970 was the only year they had. I was a junior in high school, and a bunch of my friends on the golf team actually caddied for some of the lesser known players. Back in 1970, only a handful of Arnold, of course, Jack, Gary Player, they all had their own caddies. But some of the lesser players, the guys that just barely make the cut, and they didn't have caddies, so the golf course would assign them to them. And what the Coral Springs Open did was they invited high school coaches to bring their players, and the players that volunteered could be caddies. One of my friends at my school caddied for Dave Eichelberger, and the guy that actually won the tournament, Bill Garrett, that's the only tournament he ever won, and a kid from Nova High School named Mike Donald was his caddy, and then Mike Donald went on to be a very successful pro golfer as well. But the fascinating thing for me, and I was there on Friday, and I actually saw this happen. They'll never admit that this is the reason, but they had on the scoreboard. Back in those days, they were writing on the scoreboard. Mm-hmm. It wasn't electric or anything, and the cut was at 141, which was 1 under par at that course. It was par 71, and the Coral Springs Country Club. And the cut was at 171, and Arnold was in one of the last groups, and Arnold came in at 142. And nobody said anything, but somebody went up there on the board and drew a line through 141 and wrote 142, so that Arnold did make the cut. He played on the weekend. He actually had a really good weekend, ended up in the top 10. But like I said, they'll never admit it, but I think there was some motivation for moving the cut line to allow Arnold to play the weekend. To
draw the fans
in, draw the television fans in.
He had quite an army.
He had an army.
I've read several stories about people that, and one of those was the Vietnam vet. There was another one of a young man, when he was 13, his uncle took him to the U.S. Open at Cherry Hills, I think that you were talking about. And one of the 15th hole, the fence was right near where they teed off. And that young 13-year-old and his uncle were standing outside the fence because they couldn't afford tickets to get in. And Arnold Palmer gets up there to tee off, and he looks at the 13-year-old and says, "Where do you think I should hit here?" Just something that simple drew that young 13-year-old to Arnold Palmer, and that's just the persona that he sent off with drawing people to him. It's just phenomenal, some of the stories that you read.
If you watch some of those old videos, like in the 60s at the U.S. Open, the Masters, the British Open, once they hit their shots to the green at 18, the people kind of came in.
Right.
and you see this just throng of thousands and thousands of people, and then it'd be a couple minutes, and all of a sudden Arnold would break out and go up the green, and of course everybody was going crazy. They don't do that anymore for security reasons, but Arnold would literally disappear if you're watching it on television, and it was pretty cool. Arnold is widely recognized as the first professional athlete to go with a professional management company with Mark McCormick that then became ING. He was also the first pro golfer that had a pilot's license that flew himself to the tournaments. But I think the lasting legacy of Arnold Palmer, he will always be the king when it comes to golf. But his philanthropy in and around Orlando has been phenomenal. I never really thought about it in this term, but I read a really good article that was in the Orlando Sentinel on Monday, and the title of that article was "Arnold Palmer Dies, Orlando Loses Its King of Sports and Charity." And in that article, he talked about after Arnold moved to Orlando, established Bay Hill Country Club and the Bay Hill Classic. After that, Jack Nicklaus moved to Jupiter. The PGA Tour moved to Ponte Vedra. The LPGA moved to Daytona Beach, and the PGA of America moved to Palm Beach Gardens. So Arnold kind of set up shop in Florida, in Central Florida, and the rest of the world followed. And one of the things that Arnold's famous for is his first wife Winnie, who passed away. The Winnie Palmer Women's and Children's Hospital in Orlando is widely recognized as one of the greatest hospitals in the world. So 50 years from now, when people don't know who Arnold Palmer was as a professional golfer, they'll still see that name up there on the hospital, and all the kids that have been helped through that hospital, I think it is his lasting legacy.
And that's what Tiger Woods talked about. Both of his children were born.
Yeah, that's right. Both of his kids were born at the Palmer Hospital. I will admit, I don't do this very often, but Sunday night I cried when I heard that Arnold had passed, and it was hard. And we talked about this yesterday. I think Willie Mays will be next.
Oh yeah.
And when you get our age, it's kind of your hero. Sandy Koufax turned 80 last December.
Yeah.
And
that's the way I felt about Ken Stabler.
Yeah.
He was my idol growing up. Playing for the Oakland Raiders. That's my favorite NFL team. Always has been. Probably always will be. But he's the one that.
Yeah. In the big picture of things, I probably should have been sadder about Jose Fernandez because Arnold led a wonderful life, lived a long time, 87 years, and did a lot of things and lived a full life. And Jose Fernandez was cut off at only 24. But I was much sadder when I heard that Arnold died than when I heard Fernandez died. I want to wrap this up with a quote that I think tells the whole story. But before I do that, I want to, on a much happier note. Next week, we have Lance Johnson, former Major League Baseball star, member of the Mobile Sports Hall of Fame, Brett's teammate in college, and he's going to join us and talk about the upcoming baseball playoffs. I think there'll have been one game played on Tuesday night, but we'll talk about the rest of the playoffs. But I wanted to finish today with this quote from that same article, the one that said Orlando loses its king of sports and charity. The quote from the article, I think, says it all. It says, "Thank you for building one of the premier events on the PGA Tour here, and more importantly, thank you for building one of the most renowned children's hospitals in the world." And I think that kind of sums up. Arnie, we'll miss you, man. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week at 11:30 a.m. Central Time.